What was your specific experience of data as a QS?
Didn't have any.
Data?
No,
What data?
It's a bit of a gut feel rather than something that's made.
And they wonder why 9 out of 10 projects finish late.
Yeah, exactly. It was about, you could be an amazing QS on a shit job that's performing badly because there's been an error somewhere along the line.
You know, they would laugh at the way that we actually operate. And hello and welcome to episode 182 of the Owner Build podcast with me, Paul Hemming. I'm in a good mood today. I'm sat here with Chris Barber, my good mate. We're returning to the Future of Contracting series today. And as you know, Chris, Chief Visionary Officer at C-Link, Quantity Surveyor, loves all things QS, loves change, loves process, and whenever we're here, we're talking about how we used to work and how we could work, right? And that's what these Future of Contracting episodes are all about. Chris, welcome back, mate. How are you?
Thanks, and England have just won the Euros as well.
We're currently recording this in the middle of the Euros. I'm expecting that England have not won the Euros. If they have,
Yeah, we'll keep it in. If not, can we edit it out?
Actually, funny enough, if you go back, I'm guessing it must have been like episode 50 or 60 or something like that. In Euro 2020, excuse me, I had tickets to all of the games, and there were a few episodes where I was recording either the day before the semi, the day before the final, and I was like, we've got this in the bag, haven't we? That didn't work out. So anyway, this is probably coming out in September or so, because we're recording early today, but England have not won the Euros.
Okay, we'll keep whichever version in.
Keep dreaming. So today we're going to talk about data in construction. Not something which is a topic which comes to me particularly naturally, if that's the right thing. I know it's a bit different for you. And we want to talk about data and how data can really impact the way specifically QSs work, but contractors generally can improve the way that they work. So let's kick off with what is the current state of data in the construction industry, or better, what was your specific experience of data in your role in the past, subcontractors and main contractors, Chris, as a QS?
Didn't have any.
Data?
No,
What data?
What data? Obviously being a bit tongue-in-cheek there, but really, it pains me to say it, but we were never really leveraging data in any way as an organisation.
You must have been.
Your monthly CVRs and stuff like that, possibly. You know, you're pulling out data from an old accounting system, matching it up to a separate Excel spreadsheet with your application to the client. Then you'll be looking at your payment notices and what your liabilities are, tracking that with your subcontractors and what their forecast final accounts are, and then kind of pulling those three pieces together to create your CVR essentially. So that's my experience of data. And then you'd bin that, and then you start again the next month, and you'd get in the new data. And it was a very heavily manual process, but we weren't really using it to make informed decisions. Like if a job's going poorly, you're always trying to do the best when you're procuring. So you're not going to all of a sudden turn on and go, I'm going to start saving money this time, or trying to make more money.
You're always trying to save money.
You're always trying to do that as a QS. If you have got a budget issue early on, you might try and make some changes in terms of what you're buying, but it's relatively out of your hands if you're contractor. It's more of a client gift. So if a client realises they've spent too much money, they might go, or
change the kitchen.
Yeah, change the kitchen, change the joinery. So it's not really in your gift to, unless it's D&B, to try and make some changes, the wholesale changes. But essentially, my data that we were using was scrapped basically after every month to start it again, if that makes sense, and report.
And so on the topic of procurement, for instance, you're procuring a new project today. You've just finished one. You're procuring a new one. What's your data set to start you off?
Zero, really.
Really?
Yeah. You might have some old rates and stuff. Yeah, it depends how much data.
Or your estimators rates.
Well, that's coming from the estimating. So it depends how you clarify data, isn't it? Like, is the data the information you're given from the estimator? Then yeah, obviously you've got your budget to work with. But is the culture of the business saying, we're going to harvest all this data and say, look, we're going to use it so we make sure we get best rates here. We can identify opportunities to value engineer, those kind of things. It has to be really culture driven, I think, because it's a mammoth task collecting data. And if you're doing it in isolation, then who else is contributing to it? You're going to give it to, if you're a QS on a project, collecting all this data, who's benefiting from it? Who are you going to give it to? How's it going to be relevant for your next job? All those kind of things. It's like, because it's in a silo, right? So your project is, if collecting one piece of data on that, you should have it on all 10, 20 each year, not just one, because one's not going to tell you the story, is it?
And so what data, you're complaining here, Chris, which comes naturally to you. So let's take you back to that example, right, of you've just done your estimator QS, the handoff, the kickoff meeting, whatever you want to call it, and you've got a load of data. And you've got a load of data that the estimator or the pre-con team have handed you. What's your problem with that data? How would you bolster that data? What do you want?
I think because most of the critical points, and I've talked about this in an episode, where my centre point was always the information release schedule and how that could be really informed with data. So we could be collecting things like lead times, really keeping a close eye on that, how long duration periods for certain packages. That could really start making more informed decisions on when to procure and when to start procuring your subcontract packages, because I've seen people get caught short on lead times and then they have to try and go for a different system, and it's a bit of a shit show, as people would say. So that's kind of really the important information. I always think is program information. So that includes your lead times, on-site dates, how long does it take them to get to site. Then you've got, and design periods, those kind of things. Then I'll be looking at benchmarking rates for certain items. So really collecting solid data on that, really properly benchmarked against systems, against, different product choices. And like that'd be market intelligence I could really start leveraging, because I'd know if the wall's been pulled over my eyes, or I could just make more informed decisions that way. Or if it's only slightly out, I know it's within market rate. There's no need for me to go and tender to 3 more people because I'm not too sure where it stands, if that makes sense. I know it's within a bracket of the market rate. And they're the things that can really help you as a QS in the early stages of a project.
Well, I think it's interesting listening to you talk specifically as a QS, right? Where you're actually saying, I've got the problem now of procuring the groundworks, the piling, the brickworks, the whatever, and are the lead times that the estimator has put in correct? Because I've got a problem to deal with, right? And how long does it take us to procure brickwork from tender issuance to contract signature? And have I got enough time? But actually, just thinking out loud now, if you were collecting all of that data as a business, and you said, and you knew for a fact it took 12.13 weeks on average for you to procure brickwork, or it took you X number of days per square meter of like the size of the package, right? And your pre-con team comes to you and says, Mr. Managing Director, Mr. Commercial Director, we've got this job, we're pretty much ready to sign now. This is a stellar job. And you as a main contractor could say, okay, well, let's look at the key metrics for this project, right? The price is the obvious one, but you talked about lead times and programs. Just go and look straight at that project and say, there's a huge problem here that you're handing to the construction team, the QS, with brickwork. You've got a 6-week program and it's 12.13 on average for us as a business. We can't sign this, or at least we're going to sign it because we have to sign it and we need the job, with our eyes wide open that is the primary risk. But too often you're actually talking about the symptom, aren't you, as opposed to the cause there. Like, what could data do to educate the tendering team, the pre-con team, so that you can make better decisions as well? Yeah,
definitely. I think that's feeding so once we've completed that first project, is feeding that back into the estimating team with a bit of a retrospective, saying that these timescales here were too short. That how you've sequenced it is not how it worked. It didn't work efficiently, or But that is the project team and the QS team that can really help those.
Yeah, but hang on a minute, because people will be saying, yeah, we do that. we at the end of every job we do a retro, and we go back to the pre-con and we do X, Y, and Z. But hang on a bit, that process which we've all been through, lessons learned. Let's go into lessons learned, right? Why is it that you have to prepare for a day for that lessons learned? And you have to say, how long did it take us from when we sent that first inquiry out to the contract was placed on the brick? How long did it take on X? How long did it take on Y? How long did it take on Z? As opposed to having this centralized space where we're talking about C-Link again, where all of a sudden you issue out your tenders, you go through the tender process, the tender addendum, you log all of that information, and at the end you issue out your contract, and it generates a report for you saying, this is what happened. This is how long it took you on X, Y, and Z, and then this is how long it takes you as a business, so that it doesn't have to become like a chore. It just becomes part of business practice, and like the estimators are constantly going back and seeing how long does it take to do that. Am I creating risk here?
Yeah, and I just remember now reflecting when it comes to doing that IRS, which was the centre point for me. It'd be like sat there with the with the project manager. What should we put in for joinery? What should we put in for windows? Like, let's put. Is it 10 weeks?
What, in terms of duration?
Yeah, you'd be like, let's put 12. It's a bit of a gut feel rather than something that's made.
And they wonder why 9 out of 10 projects finish late.
Yeah, exactly, exactly my point.
Well,
So-
I'm sure just you saying that, me reflecting on my own experience, everybody listening will probably say, "Oh, yeah, I've done that." Well, particularly me, right? I was a really non-technical QS, and I would lean into my project management team so much, like, how long is that going to take? And they would always say, bang in 5 weeks, call it 5, let's do 6 weeks, right? And it's just meaningless, as opposed to, and going back to data, visualization, centralization. Well, how long does it take us? How long did it take us on Bridge Street or Gate Street or all these different projects? Let's go and have a look. And the data is there. It's not a chore. It's just there.
Yeah. Also, though, you might have started your project, and your fellow QS is on another project, and they've just gone on they've just procured a certain package, and there's been a spike in the lead-in times because of, that happened a lot with all the things that happened in Ukraine, etc., like that. There might be a spike in lead times. Now they've gone to 20 weeks, but you don't know that. You're sat on your project, about to come into it, and you can't plan ahead. Got a few more weeks going, I don't need to procure that yet. But imagine a spike coming up that's shared internally that goes, right, windows are now on 20 weeks. If you've got a window package, we need to procure it ASAP.
So how do you picture that issue? That's a really interesting point. Contemporary to us in the last few years. Something macro happens, even something micro, and you're a QS procuring steel on a project, and me and you never talk, not because we don't like each other. That's part of the course, right? But you're on one side of the office, I'm on the other, or I'm on site on my job, on one side of the city, you're on the other. You get this bit of information that says there's a huge problem with steel all of a sudden, aka Ukraine. And you might tell your boss that, who is my boss, but there's no way where that's really communicated in a way that makes a lot of sense, or it gets to the estimators or gets to whoever else. So in that example, what are you saying could be a different way that we all work?
Well, if a centralized system is collecting all this information and it's talking to all your projects that you've got live at the moment with a window package,
yeah,
when you're coming out to fill out certain credentials on the order or whatever that comes in, or the feedback that comes in on the when the quotes come back in, and you fill out your program durations and the lead-in times, you could go, that could instantly highlight, wow, there's an issue here. There's something coming up here. The average time has gone up considerably. We might want to review it, just an alert. Then go out to people and think, right, this is something's happening here. There's a trend happening. We're seeing it, and then you could. C-Link's working with hundreds of clients, hundreds of thousands of projects.
Yep. That,
combining all that data, could really identify big shifts a lot sooner than what people
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's funny, isn't it, that? Because we've talked about, like, manufacturing industry before, we've talked about cars or whatever, right, where, they would laugh at the way that we actually operate. And the Ukraine war and the issue with steelwork and what happened in terms of A, locking prices down, and B, lead times with steelwork for a period of time, it's a bit different now, was massive. And I'm sure in certain manufacturing sectors, that information would have almost been not real time, but would have been much quicker. Whereas throughout that period, there were construction companies, no doubt, signing contracts with fixed price, fixed program, where there was no understanding of what was happening elsewhere, or happening with lead times, I should say. So there's so many different ways in which data could impact every department of the business, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're looking at one section of it, but things like price increases as well, you can see them happening. You'll be able to identify that, lock that price in. But like strictly from a commercial perspective, the things you're very conscious are of price and program, and really understanding that. But then you could also look a bit deeper, and obviously the scope of works that we've talked about in depth before on the show, but that is data within itself in terms of sharing what's happening with certain packages, like certain exclusions that are happening, common things that need to be negotiated and that sort of stuff. So you can have that. These are things that you aren't typically shared, I guess, within organisations. They weren't during my time. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
how you reflect on that.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotal at best, wasn't it? Or I always used to think that the way that you got better through experience, and I think that's probably a linear improvement. Everyone who gets more experience does something better the next time, better the next time, better the next time. But it was very linear, wasn't it? It was like building block project 1, then project 2, a little bit better, then project 3. When you were last on here, right, we were talking about procuring dry lining, and you talked about access panels. That's just because you'd gone through the process once, right? Or someone had told you. Whereas if the data is there, and it's quite an interesting point you make about the exclusions, right? We talked a lot about scope of works library, right? And kind of pooling together a load of analog data, which is think about the access panels, think about BWIC, think about X, think about Y, think about Z. And so you end up with this scope of works for each package, which dramatically shifts what is going to reduce your non-recoverables and protect your margin. But actually, looking at the data of what subbies do, dry lining example, all subbies are excluding this. Why are they doing that? Like, why are they doing that? And
then there will be common themes as well.
And if you had that data and it was shared at the point of need instantly, what could that do for margins, projects?
They just run a lot more smoother as well, right? The risk, if you've got identified an exclusion, you can get it thrashed out, agreed before you place the order. So rates and prices are more keener at this stage. You then have to do a lot less post-contract administration. So that is something I try to avoid, is not really issuing an instruction. I don't think I ever issued an instruction that wasn't something that I'd left out of scope.
I think that's a lie.
I don't think.
I think that is an absolute lie. I've heard some noise.
Only architect changes.
You're saying you never ever missed a variation.
Maybe scaffolding, but like
obviously that's scaffolding. Everyone misses the scaffolding. There's a thousand scaffolding variations when there isn't a variation.
No, being like genuinely serious. I'd never instructed something I'd missed out of scope.
Yeah. I'm not buying that in the slightest, and I don't think anyone listening is buying that. And I'm actually tempted to go and speak to all of your former bosses and find out about that.
We'll bring them on one day.
Yeah. And we're a totally different story. So in short, what you're talking about is centralization of data, its process. At the moment, a lot of construction companies have pricing. Estimators, I think, are a bit better in terms of it's usually on some estimating software, because estimating software exists. QSs, you kind of go off on your own. You might get put on a site. You kind of, all your quotes get sent to your email. Like, there isn't a central hub, is there? And so what you're advocating for is it should be somewhere completely centrally. What are you smirking at?
Just a fair. Well, it doesn't matter.
Still thinking about all those non-recoverable variations he was lying about. But okay, so we're going to get data centralized, and then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about visualization, and actually not just having the power of the data, but then how you're going to empower decision making through visualizing that data as well.
Looking forward to it.
So on episode 172, we met Justin Fellows. I met Justin Fellows, I should say. And that show was called A Picture is Worth 1,000 Spreadsheets. Very QS-y.
I loved it.
Yeah, you're a QS, so no wonder. Now, that episode was all about claims, right? And how it was a lot easier to evidence and prove claims through graphs, charts, pictures, right? As opposed to endless spreadsheets, Word documents, etc. And I think that really resonated. It certainly resonated with me. And we were just talking then, weren't we, in the break about data visualization and what it can mean. Pictures worth 1,000 spreadsheets. But your example there was quite interesting. You were talking about a bad project, right? Just what were you saying?
Well, I think me and you talked about bad projects a few episodes ago when we were on together. And it was about, you could be an amazing QS on a shit job that's performing badly because there's been an error somewhere along the line in estimating or whatever has happened. And you've come in and you tried to fix them. I remember that you were like the fixer at your last job. Paul comes in and fixes it. It still performs bad financially, but that's not painting the right picture, is it?
Yeah.
And there's so many like facets to that. And you know, when we talked about like the visualization, there's so much to the QS role. So, but we don't really visualize it. It might be in a spreadsheet, but we're not really looking at it in the right way. And you can't see it when you're looking through a table. It's so difficult to see.
Yeah.
But if you look at you're looking at the performance of a let's just say a project team, so the QS and the PM, the two leads on the job, and it's a bad performing project, you're not going to sack them, but how do you know if they're doing a good job, right? That kind of thing. Is that
Whose fault is it?
Yeah, whose fault is it? Is it their
Where's
fault?
the problem?
And you just some indicators, some leading indicators that you could look at. So, and lagging indicators, however you look at it.
Leading,
but it's leading, yeah. So the basics, right, for a QS, have they procured on time? Have they sent the tender out on time? Have they placed the order on time? And you could probably visualize that in a graph or a pie chart. How much is outstanding? Where should it have been at this point? How much value has been procured? How many packages been versus the total amount? You can't start visualizing that in charts, graphs, etc. And you can see actually they've done everything on time as best they could. You know, amazing time frames. They can't have done a much better job than this kind of thing. You know, things like RFIs. How many RFIs are outstanding? Have they been pushing that? Because that'd be impacting their delay management. How are they doing with their delay management? Have their extension of times been submitted on time? And these things are all dates and data that you could visualize in some kind of form of a graph or a chart, however that looks. And you could really determine, actually, no, this team have done really well. They're on top of their variations. They've 90% are priced and 85% of them are agreed. You know, you could look at all these things and think they're on top of it. They're doing a really good job. But you could have a similar project down the road that's not doing so well.
Got a fat margin in it.
Yeah, it's got a fat margin in it. But their leading indicators are, well, procurement's just about okay. They've got 50% of their variations priced because it's doing so well financially. What's the incentive for them to price and all these things? And you could hold them up with the teams and then make a decision. Right? You might say, look, you, Mr. over here, who's on this really high performing job that's because it's got loads of margin in. If you've got excess workload availability capacity, come and help these guys out over here, and then you can make those decisions to go help each other out. As a kind of globally as a company. I don't feel like I was saying earlier, data's and why I wasn't that bothered about collecting it, because it's worthless in isolation. It has to be a culture.
You mean you weren't bothered as a QS at the time? Like, it's not my problem.
Yeah, it needs to be a culture. It needs to be everybody needs to be doing it for it to be meaningful, and then you can apply it in meaningful ways. And that's just an example of how I could see it being.
No, it's really interesting because the amount of times you would be on a bad project or a good project, and as you're coming through, as I'm thinking about my own experience now as a QS, when I was lucky enough to be on some really good project or get put on good projects, and that does a lot for your social capital, almost like your career, your gravitas in a business. Oh, they're on that job, that's going well, great, they must be good. right? And what that then meant was sometimes I'd get dragged onto a shitty job, right? And go and fix that or whatever. And all of that is absolutely fine. But there was never a way for anyone to actually ascertain whether I was doing a good job. And it goes back to our KPIs conversation, doesn't it? Back on episode 150 or so. So what KPIs should a QS have? And at that time you were talking about, really great KPI would be how many sub variations are non-recoverable, right? So how many variations have they just misprocured? And there's a load of different things, isn't there? It's conversations like this isn't where I expected it to go, which makes me almost despair at construction, but also recognise the gravity of the opportunity that we actually have as an industry. Because if we had all the data in one place, which would obviously massively improve how you work, because you can do it a lot quicker, but it actually also flagged to you that brickwork package needs to be procured right now because you're going to lose time otherwise. That would be amazing, right? Obviously, that would do something special for us, but also for the business leaders to be able to say, hang on a minute, Paul's doing a rubbish job, but Chris is doing a great job. Like, it's stupid, isn't it, that we don't have that in place? So imagine for me what life could look like. Well, actually, before we get onto that, why does this bother you? Is there something going back in your career where you thought people, there was a misrepresentation, or that, the work you were doing or that other people were doing was visualized or seen differently?
When I was main contracting, it was great. It was well thought of, and it wasn't. There was nothing like I was doing a good job or not. But I remember when I was subcontracting, all my leading indicators were like bang on. Like when I got to, obviously as you mature, but applications were submitted on time, variations were always sent in weekly, that kind of thing. So all those kind of leading things were. I don't think it ever gets. There's no one really to measure me against because I was the only QS there. So, it's a bit of a difficult one. But you do think, well, I'm hitting all these things. There's other things that are not in my control. That you get viewed upon like, oh, that lost money. You're like, well, so what? Who's at fault? Why we even mention it? Let's dig into the data then. If we're going to look at it.
But that's the thing, isn't it? It's quite easy to be like, person X or person Y is on a bad job. That's the symptom, or that's the reason. When actually, going back to what we said in the first half, when you're signing that contract, does anyone really know what you're signing up to? And I think almost always, no one knows. I know it sounds mad, and obviously there is professional due diligence, and the estimating team, the construction team, everyone's got together and said, okay, 2 million and 36 weeks is about right. And it is in the margins of error. But does anyone really, really know? And if I think about my experience of getting handed a new job, and it's always quite daunting, isn't it? I'll take it back to a Battersea or whatever, right? Battersea, £50 million job. We were a subcontractor, but there was probably 10, 15 million of subcontracting, right? Yeah, handed that job, and you think, I hope that everyone was saying this job is tight, right, on margin. The reported margin from pre-con wasn't what it should be, and it was known, but we signed it anyway. And then there was all this procurement. I talked last time around about acoustic ceilings. Our company, curtain walling company, we didn't procure acoustic ceilings very often, right? So, or ever. I think it was the first time it had ever been done. So we're going out about procuring them, and we didn't know if that job was going to make any money until you started hammering through it, right? We didn't know if the program made any sense. The program, in reality, made no sense that we'd signed up to. And you just think, and there's no perfect world, right, where you're signing a contract with your eyes wide open. There's always going to be things that happen in construction, but we don't know anywhere near enough about a project. And that feeling to me, whenever I started a new project, you never knew whether it was going to be a good one or a bad one, right? And it was always like, let me have a look at it. Let's go look at the spec, look at the scope, all these different things. I don't know what your feeling is. I genuinely look back and remember that like, ooh, what's this one going to be like? As opposed to just being like, this data says that this project, it was in 3 or 4% this way, 3 or 4% that way on program. These are the risks. Think about this, think about that. That's not how it works, is it? It's just off you pop.
Yeah, I remember I was doing lots of work when I was a subby, like in terms of just repetitive kind of churning out like CVRs and stuff for these little jobs, of different jobs. And it'd be like, they'll look at it and go, ooh, it's gone down by 1%, that one. like I'm looking for me for an answer. I'm like, I'm just giving some accounting data, and I've done my part. I've done my variations, etc. There, you know, there's something else. There's a missing link to it all, really. And I just remember it quite vividly, how that made you feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that could be as the QS, that could be as the managing QS, it could be as the commercial director, managing director, CEO, whoever, right? So talk to me then about what you think a main contractor, you talked about the culture of gathering data. For a lot of people, it's quite abstract, isn't it? It's like, what data do you want me to gather? Let's imagine we're gathering a load of data that's perfect. What do you want the outcome to be? Like, because that's often it's certainly easier for me to picture. When you start talking about RFIs and all those things, when I think about that, I think, okay, you could log that quite easily. Yeah. You could pull it in somewhere central, or the system could do it for you. So help us to understand what you're visualizing and why that would make everything better.
Yeah, so it would be what KPIs are important to your business. Now, I'm going to guess that most of them would be quite similar for main contracting organisations. There'll be some nuances and some differences because they've got different requirements. But you know, get that set together. Then how do you best track that? Find a system to how you're going to track it, manage it, and visualize it, and pull it into a central source of where you can actually see it, and then review it, set in milestones, whether that's bi-weekly, monthly, or whatever, where you can look at it and go, whoa, hang on, something looks like it's moving here. Let's dive into it deeper, and get, as a management team, let's try and see what we can do to improve that situation. And it's been, rather than I said to you, come to the end of the month and I'm like, it's dropped by 1%. There's something obviously has happened on site, right? Or something's been purchased. Something could have been forward purchased and it's affected, but we're not too sure because someone else has bought a bit of plant or something like that into site, or there could be something else that's happened that I'm not close to, and someone else is. So that might then help take that, you know, you look at it, review it, and you can make a judgment call on it.
And that out of budget also tells you there's a variation or whatever else, right?
Or there's something, like, are the labour doing something else that they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, and it's also about that CVR process, and we've talked about it with you, with loads of guests on this. Why am I waiting till the end of the month? I'm going to be the CEO now. Why am I waiting till the end of the month for that CVR to sit down with you, Chris, and for you to tell me Project X is now 2% down in terms of budget? Why can't I just see that instantly? You place the order. Why can't I see it?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see it right now. I don't want to wait 29 days. I want to see it now. And I want that to empower and educate me when I'm going to speak with my counterpart, whether that's CEO to CEO, CD to CD, MQS to MQS. Like, that is something which we're fundamentally pretty weak on as a business, isn't it?
Yeah, you shouldn't be you should be able to see
industry,
you should be able to see it straight away. You're absolutely right. And that's what it would do if you've got that data visualization tool there. You'd be able to capture it there, and then you'd be able to drop onto it. It's like the dashboards we have internally tracking marketing and sales metrics and stuff. We can go on there and see where anything's at that point of day. And you should be able to do that in a construction project. The reason why, because it's so arduous putting a CVR together, because what I just described earlier, accounting system, your own Excels for your orders, your own Excels for your variations, then your clients, none of them talk to each other.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's an interesting point that you make with regards to like our marketing CRM, right? Which just the way it's set up means that every single email that is ever sent by anyone, whether that's me, you, Lloyd, Uma, whoever it is, whatever emails they send to clients, auto logs, data taken. Paul sent one, Chris sent one, Lloyd sent one, Uma sent one. If I'm making a call, the business process means that call gets logged through the CRM, And it doesn't really impact me whatsoever doing that. It's part of the procedure, and it actually makes my life easier. And then what does that mean? That when I zoom out month on month, it says, Paul, you did 73 calls. Lloyd, you did 173. That's good? Well, that's bad. Who knows? But just that process of pooling all that data then shows us, doesn't it? Whereas in construction, we don't know. It's always going up, can you update the program? And then we'll have a look at it. And by the time we've updated the program,
something else changed.
Yeah, it's gone, isn't it? Can you go and update the CVR and we'll have a look? You update the CVR, it takes you 2 days. It's already defunct and out of date, isn't it? As opposed to, and that's where it goes back to that culture, isn't it? It's about how can we breed a culture where process delivers the data so that each and every day, each and every week, each and every month, you're not going through like, oh my God, I need to do the CVR, I need to do my tender program or whatever. We do it through automated, like tender program, right? As soon as you update a tender program, it's out of date, right? With us and the tools that we have built, it's as soon as you've created a tender, the information from that tender is instantly extracted and put on the program. Same with the contract, instantly extracted and put on the program. And these are the things that we just don't do at all as an industry, aren't they? And it's interesting you talk about sales and marketing. Those industries, they're
way ahead.
It's ridiculous, yeah. We've got all the dashboards in the world that we want to see for performance of different KPIs, different metrics that matter to us as a business. It is exactly the same for construction businesses. You've reeled off 5 or 6 things to you as a QS that were really important. I'm sure someone else could reel off another 10, but we're not logging them. We're not visualizing them. And what's that old saying? Anything that you track can improve over time, right? That's probably not the exact same. But if you're measuring something, you can improve it. If you're not measuring anything, it's never going to change, is it?
Yeah.
I've completely hacked.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's a marketing reference, isn't it? If you're not tracking it, you can't improve it or whatever. There is that with the KPIs. Is make sure you're tracking something that you can change or improve upon.
Yeah.
That you're not just tracking fit data for the sake of it. Can you actually do something with that and make a tangible outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think that this episode has kind of linked us back to those KPIs point and that KPIs episode really, really neatly. And it wasn't the intention, but it's difficult to think about when someone says, centralize all your data. You think, as a main contractor, you think, yeah, obviously I'd love to do that. I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z, right? Do you understand my business? And yeah, me and you do understand their business, right? But if I actually think about the tools that we have in sales marketing, it's a really good example. And if you'd said to me, log every call, log every email, do X, Y, and Z, I'd have thought, blooming hell, really? This is going to be a right pain in the ass, isn't it? But actually it isn't at all. It becomes par for the course. It's just about the suite of tools that you've got to do that. So if the suite of tools that you've got to do that is doing it for you, and there might be minor tweaks to your process, but it means you're not doing a CVR at the end of the month because it's done. That's what we've taken the abstracts in that respect and seen the change that it can make, and that's what we're trying to do with the product, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you make a good point, Paul. You summarised it well.
Well, I don't even need a guest anymore, do I? What's the point of this? Okay, so anything else to say on data visualization, or do you think we've covered it?
I feel like we've covered it, Paul. I think we've not cracked it yet, but we will crack it.
Yeah.
And I think it's having those clear KPIs is going to be key to what businesses really need to collect, and so they can make those business outcomes and decisions. Yeah.
And without a shadow of a doubt, the data that was being captured at all of the organisations that we worked for and all of the projects that we worked on was subpar, can be a load better. And in doing that, the industry will be better, won't it? So anyway, we've come to an end. Thank you for coming on the show, Chris, even though apparently I could just do it all by myself.
You like to waffle.
I do like to waffle. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back. I'll be back next week. Chris will be back in 4 weeks. Have a great weekend.
Cheers. Thank you.